And joining me in studio is energy expert Tshepo Kgadima and CEO of Tegeta's Brakfontein Collieries and the Jacques Roux. We also are expecting Dr. Ben Ngobane, chairperson of Eskom, on the line, and Chris Yelland, an energy expert. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Now, Jacques, we had you here yesterday just talking about especially the headlines over the weekend regarding Tegeta's preferential treatment and all sorts of other allegations. What more is there to the story that we need to ventilate to get to the truth?
Thank you so much for the opportunity again. I think the one thing that maybe further clarification will assist, if you look at the process that Eskom follows in terms of awarding contracts, once your coal is initially tested and found to be suitable to a particular power station, after that, when you go into operation like we did at Brakfontein, every single stockpile that is shipped out to Eskom is individually tested by our own laboratory on site and an independent laboratory appointed by Eskom outside. The process of taking the samples of every single stockpile, I think it's important that we note that part. Every single stockpile, as you create the stockpile, it is sampled. The sampling process is observed by Eskom appointed contractors, third parties, who have got nothing to do with the mine. They are there only to observe this process, that the process is above board. Those samples are tested by our own lab. If we're happy with the spec, we send it out to Eskom's lab. If Eskom's lab gives us an approval that it is within the spec, then only does the coal leave the mine. So how is it possible that you could have coal that is outside of spec that arrived at the Eskom power station? It's not possible. If it's outside of specification, gets sent back into processing. Tested again. If found to be within specification, it ships out to the power station.
And there are
it remains at the mine.
Sure, and there are mechanisms in place to penalize the service provider in this case if they do not comply with what the requirements are.
If by some silly mistake you send out a stockpile that has got out of spec coal, the contract makes provision for that. You'll get paid R1 per ton. That's all.
Okay, let's Chris Yelland. He's an energy expert. Chris, thanks so much for your time. Just the role of Treasury in advocating for a probe in the Eskom coal contracts. I mean, what is the role of Treasury in all of it?
Well, the role of Treasury, not only in respect of Eskom, but in respect of all state-owned enterprise, is to provide financial oversight to ensure that spending is within limits, to ensure that contracts are adhered to, and really to oversee the state as the shareholder, ensuring that costs are kept under control. Treasury's role is really to look at the overall spending of state-owned enterprise to ensure that they're within budget, within the country's budget. And in that respect, they have an important oversight role over the finances of state-owned enterprises.
Tshepo Kgadima, your reaction to the correspondence between Eskom and National Treasury, where Treasury is now accusing Eskom of not being cooperative, and also bringing the invoices and all other documentation to the fore. On the one side, Eskom saying they've done and complied with all the requirements from National Treasury. What do you make out of it?
Look, what we're seeing here is that effectively National Treasury is investigating through correspondence. That is the one fundamental flaw with their approach as far as this matter is concerned. But secondly, it is my submission that indeed they are acting ultra vires. The ministry that is responsible would have been the Department of Public Enterprises, which is headed by Minister Lynn Brown. She is the one who, after all, is the shareholder representative at what happens with regard to Eskom. And when you look in terms of the issue at hand here, that actually the processes and procedures of procurement are well within what is customary and standard procedure in terms of Eskom, which all coal suppliers, by the way, are subject to. So therefore, the approach of singling out one company in this instance is not actually what is going to give us an answer to the much more bigger question. The much more bigger question being, is Eskom procuring coal at the right price, taking into account the legacy? So when one looks at it, certainly I don't think that National Treasury has acted properly, and more so to go and create an environment whereby now there are question marks, whereby they're not able to sustain it. One of the things that they mentioned, for example, is that the company, in this case Tegeta, did not have a water use right. And again, it shows, again, ignorance as far as the type of coal that is used in the boilers of Eskom. There is absolutely no need of any kind whatsoever to actually wash coal that goes in there, because you wash coal for a different reason altogether. It does not apply in the case of Eskom. In fact, if they had been subject matter experts in this regard, the issue of a water use right would never even have arisen, because it doesn't give you an answer. On the other hand, is that why only investigate one? I can go on record that last year, for example, the War Room gave an instruction that Eskom should sign the short-term power purchase agreements with the renewable energy suppliers. And those short-term purchase agreements, in fact, were done at a price which is at least 3 times what is the inherent generation cost of Eskom. That certainly warrants an investigation. But is National Treasury the right entity? No. Also, last year, Eskom was burning 800 million rand worth of diesel a month. Today, under the leadership of Mr. Brian Molefe, I believe that figure is between 9 million and 5 million per month. So certainly, this approach and this investigation is not going, even if in the event that there is no cooperation, well, what remedial action can actually National Treasury take in this case? And I'm saying there's zero.
Okay, let's invite Dr. Ben Ngubane, he's the chairperson of Eskom. Dr. Ngubane, thanks so much for your time. Now, having heard all arguments, you would be very well averse with this particular matter. And the question that needs to be answered is that the procurement process, was that followed thoroughly? Is there the necessary oversight to ensure that everything is above board, there isn't preferential treatment or even over expenditure in this case?
Well, you're absolutely correct. We have done everything by the book at Eskom. Our board tender committee is very scrupulous, and every decision is audited by a set of independent auditors, different independent auditors for each case. You know, it sounds now as if someone in the Treasury is on a witch hunt to try and discredit Eskom. It is shocking that, in fact, National Treasury could issue a press statement. You know, terrible things were said in these weekend papers, all aiming to portray Eskom as irresponsible, as corrupt, as not following due process. We take serious objection to this, particularly when it comes from the National Treasury. We should be above petty politics and above witch hunts. I would have assumed that Lynn Brown should have been questioned about this by the National Treasury, and she would have come to us, sat down with us, and would have explained the whole thing. They even complained about the issue of prepayment to coal suppliers. This has been done for the past 40 years to the cost-plus mines. Huge exorbitant amounts. No complaint has come from Treasury to say this is not judicious money spending. No. Tegeta comes along, other people can't supply us the coal. Tegeta says they can supply us the coal at a much more reduced price than some companies whose contracts have now ended. That is not taken care of. Instead, it's all impugned as if it was a special favor, as if we were simply following sound commercial practice. Buy value for what it is worth, not inflated prices that we've been paying as Eskom for the past 40 years and no one complaining about it.
Professor Ngubane, I just want to get a reaction from Chris Yelland, energy expert, that why is it that this narrative doesn't seem to sell, in the sense that Tegeta were the preferred supplier based on the scorecard and them winning the contract, of course at the demise of other companies that had this particular privilege?
Firstly, I must say that I must disagree strongly with previous speakers that have said that the Treasury's role is acting in bad faith and that they don't have a right to oversight. One only has to look at the Constitution of South Africa to clearly see the role that the Treasury plays in oversight of state-owned enterprises. Secondly, Dr. Ngubane gives the impression that all is right at Eskom, that Eskom does not act illegally. Well, I would like to just point out a recent court judgment, a High Court judgment, which in the Pretoria Court said that Eskom acted unlawfully, unprocedurally, and irrationally. That is the kind of judgment that is
all right,
given.
Chris, with all due respect, respectfully, Chris, we do have time constraints, so can we just please keep it to the matter on the table, okay? So we're talking about the Tegeta and the relationship with Eskom and what has transpired from National Treasury. And in the interest of time, can we just deal with those matters, okay?
Yes, but Eskom gives the impression that it acts lawfully when the courts rule that it does not act lawfully. So the impression that is given that all is right at Eskom is not correct.
Sapo.
Look, I think there's a fundamental misread of Section 217 of the Constitution. And in fact, if anything Treasury should have done, it would have been helpful had they told us who was a complainant that had been prejudiced as a direct result of Eskom procuring coal in the manner that they did. And also when you take into account that the volume of coal that is supplied by Tegeta, they are not the exclusive supplier of coal. They are, that power station, the size of that power station, based on what I know, it should be burning at least over 430,000 tons of coal a month. And Tegeta is supplying, I'm told, around 100,000. So it means that there are other suppliers that are supplying coal to that power station. So certainly you can't just go and look at the one company, you've got to look at the entire picture. But there is a fundamental misread, unfortunately, by Mr. Chris Yelland, as well as people from National Treasury, in terms of that particular section. Let the main thing be the main thing. And the main thing is that Eskom is a duly constituted company with a board of directors. And those board of directors, they carry a heavy responsibility. They have a duty of care. And as a result, the question should be asked, are they executing their duty and function in a manner that is in accordance with the legal prescripts, company law? And right now, nobody has come forth to actually with the information contrary to that. So this is just becoming a red herring, removing us from the main picture. And to paint Eskom as a dysfunctional company, I am convinced, based on what I'm hearing and what I have read, that there is a more sinister agenda to say Eskom, because it is a dysfunctional company, it stands to be sold, which has been on the cards for some time, or break up Eskom in some form or another, and hence companies such as Tegeta and even other smaller companies, by the way, who are not as high profile but are being left out, they are being edged out. What we need to do is to ensure that Eskom can procure coal at the least cost possible, but at the same time that it should transform the procurement by buying from largely black-owned companies. Right now, there are only 4 major companies that have been supplying coal for the last 40 years. Is that the situation that we want if we are to talk about transformation? Certainly not ideal. And if Treasury was handling that, and handling it through the correct channels, in this case through the Department of Public Enterprise, I would certainly applaud them. But right now, what they are doing is not helpful, unfortunately is irresponsible.
Dr. Ngubane, just your response. Chris Yelland suggesting that your leadership is in question, and the practices at Eskom are generally not above board or even constitutional for that matter.
Well, Chris Yelland has been waging a war of attrition against Eskom. I don't know what grounds he has against Eskom. We ended load shedding more than a year ago. An expert like him should have been applauding us, saying it, well done, carry on. How did you do it? No, everything is negative. This board is useless. Private sector people must come on the board, etc., etc. This is a campaign of showing that we cannot manage our things.